Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to address the 2021 CalTestBed Symposium. I'm so sorry I'm not there live. As usual, I would have my banter with our good friend Danny Kennedy, but unfortunately with schedules with what they are, I'm just providing these recorded remarks. But I will say that in general, I'm very excited about what you guys are doing. Here at the Department of Energy, we have made a huge shift, as the Secretary likes to describe, from just doing R&D and really preparing the technologies for the future to really figuring out how to accelerate and catalyze deployment faster. And so when you think about where we are today, particularly in the lens of climate change, but also in the lens of just national security and diversification of resources and using more of what America has to offer as opposed to importing a lot of our technology, manufacturing here, all the various goals that we have as an administration, your role is really critical. As someone who has been an entrepreneur for most of my career, I had a pretty libertarian bent to these things, right? I don't know that I ever really thought about the federal government as a partner in figuring out how to get from where I was to where I was trying to go. And so there's some folks who use the SBIR grants or others who use some of the research and development grants at the early stages of their technology. But I think today, when you think about the full suite of tools that we're bringing to bear, whether it's the new Office of Clean Energy Demonstration or whether it's the existing Loan Programs Office, which I run as the director, we're really leaning in. And so when you think about where we're headed in this whole area, the International Energy Agency has said that the vast majority of inventions needed to solve the near-term goals of decarbonization by 2035 that the president has set up for the electric utility grid and then 2050 for the rest of the economy already exist. That doesn't mean they're in fully scaled up form. Many of them still need to do first-of-a-kind demonstrations, full scale-ups, and then they have to come down the cost curve using the learning curve, and then they have to get full access to commercial debt markets, right? These are a lot of little things that need to happen to get those technologies fully at scale, and many of those things are being done by you and your companies, and that's why we're fully supportive of what you're doing. But you need help, right? And the federal government's here to provide some of that guidance across different sectors. So we're already seeing loan applications within the Loan Programs Office for green cement, for green steel, for hydrogen, different colors of the rainbow, for advanced nuclear, right, of carbon sequestration and storage, for new types and solutions for transmission, right? So when you think about all the different things we're seeing, battery chemistries, gigafactories, critical minerals, recycling, all of these things, we are doing lots of research around what does the market look like, EV infrastructure, what do business models look like? Are utilities going to pay for the DER and DERMS frameworks that actually make those EV chargers more cost effective than just being able to charge customers 40 or 50 cents a kilowatt hour? And so when you think about all of these issues and all of these thought processes, we're doing that at the Loan Programs Office. We're doing that at the Department of Energy. We're thinking through what does it take to get from $1 million scale to $1 billion scale? And ultimately, what does it take to get from $1 billion scale to $1 trillion scale? The federal government has really a unique approach to commercialization, which we really haven't talked through. But at its core, what we're really doing is inspiring private sector capital formation, right? I think long ago, the federal government put its own money in, right? When NASA put a man on the moon, or when we built the Atomic Energy Commission that built a lot of the early nuclear power plants, the federal government did all of it on its own. Today, that's really not the way the federal government operates. It works through tax credits, grants, demonstrations, loan guarantees, and increasingly procurement, right? So on green cement, there's a lot of work being done by the federal government to make sure that some of the cement that the federal government uses is green cement. And so that is something that we can do uniquely to really help spur a lot of the first projects and make sure that they get funded. And so, as you've guessed, the Loan Programs Office works with technologies that have already been proven at lab scale, right? And so we really don't work on technologies that are breakthroughs that have not yet been demonstrated, right? And so that demonstration process really happens through the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration or through some of the R&D programs and demonstration and applied offices within the Department of Energy, in concert with, of course, the 10,000 engineers, scientists, and experts who work here at the Department of Energy. So we're really waiting for it to be demonstrated at lab scale or a little bit higher, pilot scale. And then we will fund that first of a kind deployment, right? And so this is really an applied engineering issue. And so it's, really doing the modeling, saying, will this work? Can it work? Does it violate laws of thermodynamics, right? And we'll fund that first deployment. And then there's an engineering, procurement, and construction challenge, right? So now can we get the cost down by 40% just by optimizing all of the steps? This is for deployments 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? And then we say, well, can we get the cost down through scale, right? This is where the Secretary's Earthshot programs play such a big role around the hydrogen Earthshot, the long duration storage Earthshot, and then now the carbon negative Earthshot. And so that then allows for us to think through how we really bring the cost down and what the Loan Programs Office's role is in each step of innovation, right? Because you can imagine when, we launched the Sunshot program for the solar industry, most modules are about 13.5 to 14% efficient. Today, they're at 19% efficient. Today, you've got perk cells, you've got bifacial panels. These are all innovations, right? They look incremental, they look like they're not breakthroughs, but they are. Getting a solar panel from when I started in the solar industry at a 10% average efficiency when we were at AstroPower back in 1995 to where we are today really are a series of breakthroughs, and we just, I think, gloss over them as if they're incremental innovation. All of those innovations qualify for the Loan Programs Office. And then the final step, which is the most difficult, I would say, to really figure out, is really around securitization, right? And it's really getting the banks to think through how do we take all of these loans and actually securitize them in the market to pension funds and insurance companies and really cross that entire bridge to bankability so that on the other side, there is a commercial bank, hopefully your local bank, that actually wants to support you. And the reason they want to support you is they know they can sell that loan into a larger securitization effort, which is what allows them to take that extra amount of risk that they may not feel comfortable taking. The other thing that I would say is that this really is about the entire ecosystem. And the American approach to commercialization really is around the entire ecosystem understanding what we're trying to do and what the goal is. Right? We start with the president saying that we have a goal of figuring out how to get from where we are today to a large amount of emissions reduction. Fantastic, right? Then we go to figuring out what that means by sector, right? So how much nuclear do we need? Maybe not nuclear. Maybe what we need is flexible baseload capacity, right? So it's not just nuclear, but it's biomass using BECCS, it's advanced hydropower, it's advanced geothermal, it's other technologies that have the ability to scale up and down with the power and really be that flexible baseload capacity as we ramp down coal plants and natural gas plants. I think the other thing that we're talking about is figuring out, well, what role does demand flexibility play in this, right? What role does, being able to shift consumer loads and industrial loads really play in managing the grid? I think we all know that with electric vehicles being added to the grid in the way that we operate them now are going to have to be substantially improved and enhanced. But it's about 1/10 the cost to just pay people handsomely, I might add, to be able to allow their loads to be flexible. And that allows us to now include environmental justice communities and other communities into this revolution so that the wealth creation that we're creating through this actually permeates all of the different sectors and all Americans. I think we're also talking about figuring out how we actually integrate municipal leaders, county leaders. They're the ones making the decisions around infrastructure for their communities. How do we figure out the role the electric utilities play, the natural gas utilities play, and others in these new gases, right? We're talking about managing CO2 pipelines. We're talking about managing hydrogen pipelines. All of these things require other people to participate. So when you think about the industrial hubs that we're thinking about doing for the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration, we're looking for all of these parties, local universities and others, to get involved and say, what does it look like for us to take collective action? What does it look like for, it's not just one company making that decision, but it's actually 15 companies recognizing that the cost of each one of them operating on their own is too expensive. But if all of them work collectively, they can reduce the cost substantially. And then what role do we play in the financing space between government bonds, grants, low interest loans from places like the Loan Programs Office? What role does an operator play, right? When you think about project finance, it's not just about the technology, which is what everyone focuses on, but it's also around feedstock availability, right? It's around offtake agreements, who's going to buy the product that we're making. And most importantly, it's about operations. I was talking to a venture capitalist recently, and we had a good conversation about innovation. And I said, did you know that the biggest challenge that we have is it takes 15 years for many of these assets to be operated well? So when you think about solar plants, when you think about how they were operated and the operations and maintenance agreements that we wrote and signed back in 2010 for the projects that we supported, those costs were 4x the costs of where they are today. And many of those projects were operated poorly for the first 5 years of their operation. And only recently, 11 years later, are operating really, truly to where they can operate, right? And you see the same thing with sustainable aviation fuels. You see the same thing with nuclear plants. When we built them in the 1970s, we were not at the 95% availability that we're at today. We were at a much lower availability before that. And so when you think about the level of innovation and expertise that we need in operating these assets, whether you think about DERs and DERMs, one of the biggest complaints from utility companies or independent system operators is they don't think that these resources are reliable. They think that when they make a call, that the amount of safety factor that you need is very high. You might need 4 times the amount of subscribers that will allow you to flex their load compared to what you really need to be able to deliver that amount of megawatt savings, just to make sure that not a lot of people opt out, that folks are not using their refrigerator or their water heater or whatever it is for other purposes at the time. And so as the operations software, which is also innovative, becomes tighter and better, you can imagine that safety factor might go from 4x to 2x or 1.5x, because you can get much more reliable predictions around what is possible based on how many people you've signed up. And that will be a much more lucrative model, and it will reduce the overall cost to the system. And so, look, we're very excited about this revolution. I think that, as the president and the secretary have said, it is very obvious to all of us that this is the largest wealth creation opportunity of this century, right? When you think about what the greatest engineering feat of the 20th century was, it was the electric grid. The greatest feat this time around will be across many sectors, not just the electricity sector, but also the transportation sector, the buildings sector, as well as farming, industrial processes, etc. We're not just going to create installation jobs, we're going to be creating manufacturing jobs. There's a lot of onshoring of these technologies. We're going to be making them here in the United States. And I think it's also important to note that we are going to make sure that this is a just and equitable transition to the clean energy economy. And so whereas I think people were frankly deliberately left out in the last go around, and many folks were deliberately in harm's way for much of these large scale assets, we're going to make sure that we are deliberate about thinking these things through and making sure that everyone has a seat at the table so that they are heard. But we're also going to make sure that America can do big things at scale again. And we are going to be delivering at $1 trillion scale. and I hope you'll join us. Thank you so much.